A new poll by Big Village's online caravan found that of the 425 Democrats polled, 59% chose President Joe Biden as their 2024 presidential nominee, but 19% chose Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Another 11% threw their support behind Marianne Williamson.
When the poll omitted the President Biden from the choices, roughly 44% of Democratic voters supported RFK Jr. and about 30% chose Marianne Williamson, and then another 28.5% said someone else. When asked who should be the Democratic presidential nominee, that's another pretty good result for RFK Jr. and Marianne Williamson.
That's fascinating. So I actually had a last-minute interview with Ro Khanna on my own podcast, Bad Faith, last night, and I asked him this question because of so many progressives are frustrated with how the debt ceiling negotiations went. I said, at some point, is the way that Joe Biden has handled this, or Democratic leadership handled this, disqualifying and more evidence that you should be open to these challengers to Joe Biden? And what he said to me was, if there are more polls, multiple credible polls that come out that show a substantial number of voters actually have interest in these alternative candidates, then yes, I'm more open to the idea that there should be debates and that Joe Biden should be crowned the nominee by the DNC. Here we go. This is yet another poll. It's unclear how many polls it's going to take for Democrats to start to take these candidates seriously. But when you compare the polling numbers of RFK Jr. and Marianne Williamson to almost anybody on the right side of the aisle who are competing against Donald Trump as the front runner, they're blowing them out of the water.
Absolutely. The Republican contest, I'm sorry, I've said this a number of times. People don't like it, but it's true. It's a contest between Trump and DeSantis. No one else has a chance. That includes Mike Pence, who's set to get into the race soon. That includes Chris Christie, who's getting in there. He's going to make a huge splash. I didn't even mean it like that. Tim Scott, Nikki Haley. No, it's DeSantis or Trump. You're absolutely right. Then on the Democratic side, people act like it's a lock for Joe Biden. And yes, he's very likely to get the nomination, in part because there's just he benefits from the DNC totally ignoring these other two candidates who are polling just as well or better than people who are being taken seriously on the conservative side by conservative media. Conservative media is more interested, and conservative voters are more interested in hearing from a variety of perspectives. They're not. No one is working at this juncture to unite Trump again without an actual fight.
Yeah.
You can't say that they're all saying, nope, sorry, it's Trump's thing. We're not going to listen to anybody else. You can't accuse the right of doing that. There are certainly people, constituents who prefer Trump and very much want it to be him again, but he's going to have to fight for it against at least one very credible challenger and then a number of other people. On the Democratic side, it's wild.
It's black and white. Now, to be clear, there are Republicans who don't think that Donald Trump should have a debate. They're shutting down that conversation in a similar way over there. But when you look at how the media, including the liberal media, is treating Ron DeSantis as a credible challenger versus the other two. Now, I wanted to make sure I looked at these poll numbers so I don't get them wrong, because I don't want to be
called milk with toast.
Milk toast by Donald Trump. But this is from a CNN article from yesterday. Trump is the first choice of Republicans, 53% to DeSantis is 26%. Okay, so RFK Jr. has been steady at around 19-20%. Marianne Williamson around 9 to 11% in all of these polls. So combined, more than Ron DeSantis, but even RFK Jr. on his own is far outflanking the Vivek Ramaswamis of the world and the Nikki Haley's of the world and the Tim Scotts of the world and the Mike Pences of the world whenever that
and Vivek Ramaswamy is wall-to-wall coverage of him. He's on Fox constantly. He's on all sorts of conservative programming. They're platforming him.
And liberal programming.
Right, yeah. He's being platformed.
He took down Don Lemon.
RFK Jr. and Marianne, they make appearances. Marianne was on with Mehdi Hasan
for a very tough interview that I think Marianne actually handled very well.
Yeah.
And if you look at the comments, by the way, on Twitter, when Mehdi said he was going to interview Marianne, he got dragged for it. His audience says, I can't believe you would talk to that woman. If you go to YouTube, where the interview was posted, and read the comments, uniformly glowing. Marianne's really saying it how it is, yada, yada, yada. And I think that really reflects the difference between the kind of the political sphere, the media sphere that Mehdi Hasan lives in, and these people who are making the choices about who to platform and who not to, and what the general public thinks.
Right. They're not on a daily basis. They're not talking to RFK Jr. with anywhere approaching the frequency with which conservative media is talking to legitimate or even much less likely alternatives to Donald
Or even
Trump.
RFK Jr., conservative
They're
media.
talking RFK Jr. more than yes, for sure.
Attention to RFK Jr.
For sure.
So at a certain point, I think you've got to listen to what people have to say.
Yeah.
If you are so confident that RFK Jr. or Marianne Williamson are so facially, plainly ridiculous that no one could take them seriously, then put them on the air, let them talk, and let the chips fall where they may. But the choice to do what
and grill them on what they think.
Right.
Don't do a whole. Why are you running if Joe Biden is so likely? And do you think
Aren't
you're
you a spoiler?
And how with the audacity of you? How dare you?
That was a really revealing moment from the Mediasan interview, actually, because he says, and I believe this is true, from a policy perspective, I agree with everything that you're saying, Marianne. But yada, 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 you're a spoiler, how can you win? And Marianne replied, I think very astutely, this is a presidential primary. There can be no spoilers.
Right.
Quite obviously, right? And if you genuinely believe in everything that I believe, and you have these substantive criticisms of Joe Biden, why wouldn't you vote your principal in a primary election? And if you think that I can't win in a general, then you have to make the case for why I can't win in a general. But Joe Biden is a candidate where 70+ % of Democrats don't want him to even run. So if you're going to start having conversations about electability, you should start with the oldest president in history, who is deeply unpopular, who most of his own party doesn't want to run, being the choice of the Democratic Party.
Yeah, it's wild, and the refusal to have debates, the rigging of the whole system for Joe Biden is just. It's something James Vanderbeek has taken notice of. We talked about that yesterday on the show. And that's been covered a lot on conservative media. Like, even from a tactical standpoint, do you want to give the opposition, media opposition activists, political actors on the right, the ammunition of just mocking your candidate for the system being so rigged in his favor? Like, that doesn't seem. We talk about how that's sabotaging, how they say that how having debates and all of that would harm the candidate. Doesn't not doing that also harm the candidate by making him look weak and subjecting him to endless mockery from people who, some of whom are Democratic, like James Vanderbeek? Just to take one example, like this is not losing the crucial James Vanderbeek vote is not the end of the world, but there are so many people even within the Democratic coalition who are clearly expressing that same frustration. Yeah,
100%. Not to mention that there's an entire state now that is pretty frustrated with Joe Biden and the ostensible rigging of the Democratic primary. He is likely to have to forfeit New Hampshire in its entirety because of his choice to reorder the primary schedule to have a friendly state to him, South Carolina, go first. And this has opened up an amazing opportunity, at least in the eyes of the Marianne Williamson and RFK Jr. campaigns, to get on the map, as it were, and be forced to take seriously if the primary does, in fact, start. Those states start voting. New Hampshire can decide when it wants to hold its elections. The states have their own capacity to do this. And if it goes up on the board that Marianne Williamson or RFK Jr. has fully won a state in a primary contest, I don't know how the media is going to be able to flatly ignore that. Now, Bernie did win the first 3 contests back in 2020, and they made it into a big nothing burger, and they Russiagated him after he won Nevada, and they just patiently waited for South Carolina to vote, and they were able to give, I think, some millions of dollars, I don't want to misquote, but an incredible amount of earned free media to Joe Biden because of that, and it ended up how it ended up. But still, I do think there are these cracks and opportunities for these insurgent candidates to make themselves known, and it's not clear to me that the mainstream media is doing themselves any favor by hoping that the Bernie blackout strategy is going to prevail.
Well, glad we didn't get into any milquetoast poll numbers there. We avoided being milquetoast. Don't come for us. More Rising right after this.